Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective, and then the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. Well, again, welcome to the show, and if you like the show, you've been listening for a while, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know that the show is worth listening to, and that'll certainly help advance our cause and the cause of Christian education. Our guest today, I'll be joined by Dr. Collette. She's the superintendent at Aurora Christian Schools in Aurora, Illinois. She's an accomplished leader, serving a long tenure in Christian school leadership, but also serving on national and international leadership teams as well. Her reputation for quality work and professionalism and credibility are renowned in educational circles, so I know you're going to enjoy our conversation today. But first, let's go ahead and set up this episode, and let's go to school, as we like to say. Today, I need you to know more about the importance of credibility for the leader and how character drives this quality. Again, the importance of credibility and how character can help drive this quality. This is the third episode into what I'm calling the leadership series, where I want to focus on Christian leadership, primarily within the field of education, of course, and call attention to the habits and the character traits and the competencies of distinguished Christian leaders. So let me start like this. I think I can speak for many of us who would say that there are parts of the election season that we find exciting, and there are other parts that are just plain painful. I grew up watching those debates of Reagan and Carter and Bob Dole, Al Gore even, and I can tell you they're vastly different from the debates that we see on TV today. Not only were these debates simply more civil and respectful as the candidates laid out their party platform, but they were usually free from those disturbing attacks on the opponent's character and credibility. Now we seem to have moved to the polar opposite end of things, where the credibility of a candidate's position is virtually unknown because we just don't even know what's accurate and what's really true, which is why we have that fact feature today after those debates. So the parties that are jockeying for leadership of the country, they just focus often on the questionable character of their opponent. It's interesting that even in a society where the ideals of absolute truth and morality and Christian ethics are being pushed aside, Americans know that character matters in leadership. We may have no common concept sometimes of what character really is, but we know that without it, everything breaks down when people don't follow the leader. Albert Mohler writes that character is indispensable to credibility, and credibility is essential for leadership. We don't want to question the character and credibility of our leaders. We want to trust them, and we want to have confidence in what they're going to do, not only in their skills, but in their ability to represent us and our values, and certainly act on our behalf. In the Christian worldview, our character has to align with the convictions of our Christian faith. The convictions come first, and then character is a product of those convictions. All of us, including our leaders, are sinners and we make mistakes for sure, but we're far less likely to fail if we're living in step with the standards that God set forth in His Word. When people see this alignment, when they see that your behavior matches your convictions or convictions match your behavior, they follow because they know what they're getting. There's a transaction that takes place here. The leader represents the people and serves their best interest, and then the people in exchange willingly follow that direction. So if you're credible, they'll follow. So how do leaders gain credibility? What can we do to create a culture of followers that are anxious to follow our vision? Well, that's what we're going to talk about with our guest, Dr. Collette, today, and hopefully give you some leadership insight and some direction moving forward in your career. But first, 2 quick chalkboard points just to wrap it up and for you to consider moving forward. Number 1, character matters. Effective leadership requires the trust and the confidence of the followers, and no leader is going to be effective without strength of character. Chalkboard point number 2, credibility can be earned and credibility can be lost. Ground your credibility in the Christian convictions, not just in your strength of character. So again, that's a good summary for today. And so as I like to say, now you know more. When you know more, you can do more. You can not only think differently, but you can act differently, and you can say no more when you must. So with that, let's go ahead and bring in our guest and welcome Dr. Collette House. It's great to have you today with us, Collette. Thanks so much for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Si.
Oh, excellent. She began her career teaching high school math and sports medicine at Aurora Christian in 1992. And I would say that's the same year that I started here at MCS.
Yep.
So
we have
strange
like the
to
same
think
path.
about that. Yes, exactly. Same path, same career, right? A lot of the same dynamics. Excellent. She's been a part of the administrative team since 2000, became a middle school principal in 2006, and then her current role as superintendent in 2010. In addition to her work there at Aurora Christian, she serves as a board member for ACSI, which is the Association of Christian Schools International. That's where our paths cross often. She's a member of the Central Division West Accreditation Commission. That's a commission that looks at school standards to make sure schools are meeting those state standards to be accredited by usually the state and, of course, ACSI. She also chairs the Global Commission on Accreditation, which would be international schools for ACSI as well. She often collaborates with other Christian school administrators. She consults for accreditation and promotes excellence in Christian education throughout the country and the world. So again, pleasure to have you. Good to say those things about you, and happy to know you as well.
Well, thanks, Si.
Yep, good. Well, tell us a little bit about, as we look at your background, your tenure at Aurora Christian. You've seen a lot of change like me. You've been doing this for over 30 years. What seems to stand out to you as some of the more significant changes in this day and age that you've seen?
Man, a couple big ones, I would say. I feel like in the early days, parents were partners with us in the education of their kids, and it feels like it has shifted to being consumers. Like they're paying their money and they want us to do it all. It's a product, which it is in a way, but we still need that partnership for sure with those parents and the churches and the school. That's one big change. I would say also, we used to just be a school, right? When we went to college, it was, let's learn, how do we instruct math? How do we teach this? And even classroom management. Now school is all things to all people. We have to deal with social needs, emotional needs. We have to be the church to many of our families. All those things. Be the kind of the nurse and the doctor, almost everything to these kids today. So it's just a different world.
Right. So you would certainly trace some of those changes back to shifts in the culture largely are being brought to school.
Oh, for sure. I definitely think. And I think even, especially since COVID, but even before that, I feel like we just want things, instant gratification. We want them to come to us. It's harder to get up and get out. And that work ethic over the last, 20 years has declined a bit, I think. And we just want results. Like, just give me results. We want easy results. And it's not easy. Raising kids is not easy.
So you became the superintendent in 2010. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you had some background there, and you have some, like myself, you had some credibility probably established. Mm-hmm. But being, high school, middle school principal is a little different than saying, okay, now I've got financial responsibilities, I've got donor responsibilities, I've got alumni responsibilities. Yeah. It's much bigger, of course. So how did you back then, when you took on the role and said, okay, I think, Lord, I'm ready for this, I'm going to accept this offer. How'd you start to establish credibility then with your broader constituents?
Yeah. I think, right at the start, we were in a financial crisis. It was 2010. So if you kind of think back to the era, so for me, it was kind of thrown into the fire. So initially it was just that I'm still here. There were people panicking and leaving and just staying, and that stability and staying the course, that was part of it. I stayed in the trenches a bit, which is hard for a school leader, but I was still teaching some. I taught AP Calculus, I taught some things, so I still could help the parents. I still knew the kids, the teachers knew I still understood what was happening in the classroom. Credibility for the larger population, I think, especially even with the secular world and the schools around us, was getting my doctorate. That wasn't just let's learn a lot of stuff. It really kind of was, I felt responsibility for my school to give credibility to my school and my teachers. That was part of it too. But I think just being there, staying the course, steady, adds credibility over the years. relationships.
Right. Yeah. So you use, experience, those relationships, and of course your education. And in the trenches, I like that because they know that obviously you came through the system, you know the system, use that human capital as we like to talk about.
For sure.
Yeah, that was certainly there for you. Yeah, and those are maybe some obvious things, but they matter more than maybe people think they do.
I think they do, because when a leader loses credibility, which happens a lot, it's that people feel personally offended, personally hurt. I think that's because we base credibility on personal trust and relationship. You feel a tie even if you don't know them personally.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, speaking of trust, Moeller writes in his book, and I'm a big fan of Conviction to Lead, so I use it often. When leaders enter the room, trust and confidence has to enter with them. And so I think you would probably agree. How do you see this playing out at your school? I mean, have you ever noticed that in meetings that either you've been a part of or other meetings that people have been a part of? And then even especially, not only your own personal experience, but when you've served on the accreditation teams, I think that would be an interesting take as well to say, have you observed it when you go in with objective eyes other places?
Yeah, you can tell when the leader enters the room, if the staff are following or just, that's the person that has to take the microphone. I think it's important to know who's entering the room. And that's part of that relationships too. If your staff trusts you, they know when you come in who you are. And I think a lot of the credibility of that too is so they know Collette is entering the room, but which Collette are they going to get? It should be the same one every time. Not, well, today is she going to be happy and tomorrow she's going to bring down the hammer and the next day she's going to be crabby. Kind of as leaders, I feel like we give up a little of that freedom to just wear our heart on our sleeve. We need to be that confident, credible face, and the same. I mean, there are times, of course, when you have different personalities, you're bringing the joy or you're bringing detail, but not in an unquestionable way, a fearful way, which I do see in accreditation sometimes too, like, we're not sure if she's going to be mad at us today. We're not sure what's going to happen.
Really? Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you observe that pretty quick when you go into those other schools? And can you read the room fast enough to say, this is a group that maybe doesn't trust their leader?
Yeah, I think so. You
What's
can
that
read
look
it pretty
like?
fast. Disengaged, almost even snickering or rolling eyes, which is just really sad to see, but you can see that. I think it's tricky. I think that a triangle, you don't like to think of like you're rising to the top as a leader, but you kind of are in a triangle kind of way. There are a lot of people in the trenches, and then there's a little bit less at each level of leadership you get until the very top, the top leader. Well, as you get closer up on that triangle, I think you have less and less space for freedom. Like, we don't get to just spill our hearts or spill our crabbiness or our problems. We need to always be positive on mission for our school in the good and the hard times.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if those people that are having a hard time with that are not acting in a consistent way, like you said. Maybe they're coming in thinking, oh, I really want to be transparent, and then maybe it might be backfiring a little bit and that there's room for that. But yet, on the other hand, yeah, you're right. You don't always get the luxury of wearing your heart on your sleeve at every public meeting. They
want to know that we're real, but they don't want to know if we're scared and all the bad stuff that's happening.
Yeah, the longer I'm doing this, the more I agree that, people are fine as long as they perceive that you have a plan or you're working on a plan.
Yeah.
If you have no vision, and just look like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and you have your, head in your hands at those meetings, that does not give the follower a lot of confidence.
Well, I feel like the scripture says that, right? Where there's no vision, people perish.
Right, and they're perishing right in front of us here
I know.
in these meetings. That's not a good thing.
Oh, man.
Well, I have not seen that too many times. You've done a lot more accreditation teams than I have. I have not seen that too often. I've seen a few. Where I could tell that, I'm not sure these troops are rallying around that leader. But
usually you don't see that because by an accreditation visit, they've kind of got it buttoned up. But you can kind of tell when it's an act too. Like, oh, they're just doing this because I'm here, but they don't really trust this guy.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. And so that's a good segue to the next question, right? Is there's a exchange. What do you think about that idea? And I don't know if people always realize that, because I remember reading in my graduate studies on leadership that, don't forget, and they were just using it as a word of caution, but don't forget, it's the followers that have all the power. You may have a title on your door, but if they choose not to follow you, if this exchange breaks down because they don't like what we were just talking about, they don't like what they see, and the transaction then crumbles and they've decided to walk away, you're not a leader. Yeah.
No.
So, how do leaders create a culture then where the followers are anxious to follow our lead? What do you think about that?
I think by listening to ideas, being open, engaging with everyone, not being it's my way or the highway, being willing to adapt, learn new things, but in that adapting, not getting blown about by every single idea. I also don't think the group wants to see the random person over there gives an idea and the leader goes, oh, sure, I'll follow that, when it's not the best. I think you need to be willing to have that, but also have a plan, kind of anchored. The leader needs to be anchored and confident, enthusiastic, but willing to give up that spotlight. I don't think we need to always give up the spotlight to someone who's got great ideas, or to another leader, to your principals, to another. I think people value that. I don't think that's weakness. I think that's strength.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard it said, I'm sure you have too, you don't always have to be the smartest person in the room.
No.
Yeah. And a matter of fact, if you are always the smartest person, you need to get some new friends.
Better team around you. Yeah.
That's right. New people in the room, because, you're the one generating all those ideas. And I think that's certainly true.
And that's part of credibility too. Wow. That leader may not be the smartest leader in every area, but he or she knows how to find the person who is and bring them to us. That's part of our job as leaders. Bring the talent.
Right. Yesterday at the conference I was at on leadership, one of the sessions was on strategic planning. And they really talked about exactly what you said. Hey, when you're going to start that strategic plan, you had better be a good listener. And if you're not developing that skill, then you need to work on it, because that's really where it starts in terms of those people trusting your vision.
For sure. It's important.
Yeah.
And it has to be really intentional, because that's hard. We get busy. I'm doing that right now. I'm trying to start some times where I'm listening to my people for my next strategic plan. What excites you about the future? Let's see if we can make it happen.
Have you ever done one of those listening tours or something like that, where you've just said, okay, this is an intentional program of listening? Have you ever done that?
I'm kind of starting one of those, and I haven't labeled it that yet. So maybe people who are hearing this are going to go, oh, wait. But internally, I've said this is kind of my year to just be listening, because we had a large debt. I said we had, crisis years ago. We've paid off our debt, which the Lord has been amazing. But now it's a new era, new season of moving forward. And I might have all the best ideas that I think in the world, but I need to hear what really is out there. What do parents, what do staff, what do they want?
I know. And that's hard. I know I was a little convicted when they went on and on about the listening, because, and he was good to say, the speaker was good to say, it's tough for us because we've done a lot of studying and we kind of know a lot of things, maybe even more than the group. And so it's easy for us to kind of get to you
hear an idea and you go, that totally doesn't work. I've tried it. Or here's why it wouldn't. Yes, it's hard.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep. And so you might be tempted to take them a certain direction where you want them to land. They just don't know it yet.
Right.
And you may get there and you may have been right, but you may not have been right.
You may not. I know. Kind of got to see. That's hard. I'm working on that myself to gain credibility.
Well, take solace in the fact that, we've got similar career paths and I'm doing the exact same thing. So
sure.
I think we're all still in it together. It's amazing how much you have to continue to learn. Like you said, they need to see us learning.
Yes, always. For sure.
Yeah. Well, we recently were in D.C. together, and that was a great experience on behalf of ACSI as state representatives and also as commission members, board members, things like that. So we heard Ben Carson speak. And, how interesting that, we're talking about character and credibility, because I really think that most people go hear him for that reason.
Yes.
And even after we heard him that night, I don't think people listen to him because he's this dynamo on stage. Of all the speakers we probably heard, he probably spoke with maybe the less intensity or the least amount of passion in the sense that,
we were talking about that too.
yes, that he's not animated. And, some of that is just, where he's at in his career, of course. But everything he said is just carefully calculated. And, it's backed with a lot of credibility.
Yes.
And I think we're all impressed by the fact that he hasn't lost it over all this stretch. And like I said, credibility can be earned and credibility can be lost. And Mohler makes that point. How do you think guys like Carson have been able to manage this, throughout their whole career? What is it about these guys that you think, and, maybe you and I try to emulate as well, that has inspired such longevity of character?
And I think part of it is just that longevity. Like when you stay, and we've talked about that, some leaders move schools every 3 years or move companies every 3 years. But the people that really have made a name and really have made a long-term impact have stayed. And I think even for Dr. Carson, he has stayed true to his mission. He has always said, reading was so important, and, the true things, the character that mattered, that consistency. He has grown and he's changed and he's adapted. I think we all need to be willing to grow but staying on that same mission. Like you always have that same mission, even though you may be adapting it for times and new.
Yeah.
I think that's important. When people change their mission or veer off course, I think they lose credibility. Like, well, I don't know what he believes anymore, so.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you hit it right on the head. I think the same, that his mission is a result of what he believes to be true. And we would call those convictions. That, yep, this is what I'm about. My mission and my convictions have not changed. And so, that has kept him centered and kept him grounded there. In that sense, what are some of the convictions that you have that really drive, Collette House?
Yeah. I think my biggest conviction is that I believe the Lord has called me to lead in Christian education. He's called me to Aurora Christian for this time. Everyone says, well, do you want to go do this? And would you like to go do that? And the Lord has called me here. And I think that's a conviction. And that pretty much drives just about everything I do. And I know your job should not be your identity, but because my conviction is so rooted in, I believe Christian education is the best place to train up the youth, right? I think that is the most tangible. I mean, even church leaders who have never supported Christian schools before are starting to go, oh my word, you have them 35 hours a week. We have them 2 hours a week. We've got to get on board with Christian education. We work with, big pastors work with the youth. And because that's my conviction, that I believe to change a generation, to impact a generation for the Lord requires the children and training up these kids. That's my conviction.
Yeah, right. Called to lead, and Christian education is the,
And so then your character, then it's kind of funny, but it's true. When you're out to dinner, you're like, well, if anyone sees me here, I am a Christian school leader. So that I have to be, and I'm not that I'm needing to do anything that's not credible, but that is just a guiding anchor. This is who I am. So
right, that your behavior is the
is
result
driven
of that.
by what you believe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I jokingly tell that to people all the time that, if I'm going to the grocery store, I'm still the superintendent.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
don't take that hat off. And
Never.
you don't have to necessarily wear a suit to the grocery store, but you do need to know that, people are saying you took this job because of your Christian convictions. So let me see that play itself out in your life, even at the grocery store.
Right. I
Or
may
at
be
the
wearing
sporting
sweatpants and a sweatshirt and shorts and have a hat on, but the way I treat people at the grocery store should still align with who I am and what I, preach at school.
Yeah, exactly. Do you try then to kind of say to some of those young people that are coming up through your system, that, hey, follow my lead in this, and how do you get them to see Christian education the same way you do? Because you'd like to think that I'm training the next Dr. Collette House here, and they're going to have the stability that you had, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you really want that, especially when you see some 20-year-olds that are all-stars, and you go, wow, if they stay here or stay in Christian education, this is going to be good for the kingdom. How do you try to pass that on, or, your convictions anyway? I mean, what kinds of things are you doing with your staff that says, and I'm trying to build in them the same kind of passion for a Christian education?
I think really being real. We're a very authentic school. I think being real with those leaders it's not easy. It does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of education, but there's a reason we're here. We are called, and I'm very kind of down to earth, and for sure no one here calls me doctor, none of my staff, but I love action movies. I love sci-fi. I love Marvel. You probably know this about me, Si. I don't know. But I have like a running devotion theme. I did a big long one, and I always tie it in somehow, of the Avengers. And I have a picture of the Avengers, and it's a great picture of them all. They're all leaning forward. They're all geared up. They all have their weapon in their hand. And so I always talk about how they all have the same focus. They're all looking at the same thing. And we all have different strengths. We all have different weapons. We all have different, backstory. All of the Avengers have terrible backstories, and all from different backgrounds, but they are all unified and on mission. And so I just talk about that a lot. Like, we are on mission. This is who we are and why we do it. So they're like, can I wear my Avengers t-shirt tomorrow? Sure. I love it.
Well, that totally fits. Your affection for the Avengers fits with your palate, as you and I have joked about before, that, you're still ordering off the kids menu.
I totally am like a kid. Burgers, pizza. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, speaking of kids, you ever done that same kind of talk with the kiddos that, hey, when we want to talk about character, can we talk about being on point in the Avengers? You ever talk about that with kids?
I don't think I have actually done that with the kids. I think they've said, hey, you need to do this in chapel. And I think I do. So I have a teacher actually who does the same thing, and I love it. He met with me yesterday, and he has he's a high school science teacher. And so his physics final, or his physical science and chemistry final, they're watching like Age of Ultron or an Avengers movie, and they're identifying the things, the physics concepts of how that blew up and how that, that. But along with that, there's things about their character and so I love that. I love that my teachers buy into that and are, using it. To reach the next generation, we have to be real. They can't see us as stuffy old, 50-year-olds that don't understand even just their hearts and their passions.
Yeah, and I think even more than our peers, but the kids are watching for that consistency you talked about too. The stability. Does her behaviors match what she's saying in chapel, what they're teaching about, things like that. So I think as leaders, we can't forget that even those elementary kids, certainly high school kids, but even those elementary and junior high kids are trying to figure out, how do I live this Christian life? And everything in the culture is fighting against them. So if I can identify that with Dr. House or Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith or something like that, then I can at least see some pattern. Hopefully it's like mom and dad and your youth pastor and things like that will help me learn to live as Christ would want me to live.
Right. I had an alumnus come back and was sharing her story, and I didn't agree, biblically with the way she was living, but she was justifying it biblically. And I said, well, would it be okay if I did that? If I went and I'm not married, went and lived with my boyfriend? Well, no, you could never do that. You're not, they have a standard. They know truth, and we're being an example of Christ for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what an interesting, little ethical conundrum she walked herself into there.
Totally.
Right. Exactly. That was certainly an invitation that, why would it be any different?
Right.
Both as Christ's children, that's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you see that next generation of leaders, do you see them responding? In other words, does that concern you at all that the leadership group coming up next has got such cultural pressure that it's going to be hard for them? Does that worry you at all? Or do you say, we're doing the best we can, we're pouring into them, and I'm excited about the next generation coming up? Where do you sit on this issue?
I think, so I have been worried, they're just not really there, but I think I made a note to myself about that. I really do think I'm not as worried as I used to be. I think they're the ones who don't buy into the time and the effort and the energy it's going to take are I should know this word. They're getting out on their own. I really think it's not, they realize like it's not worth it, right? They really are thinking, if I'm going to be in this, I want to be in this all in.
Yeah.
I think they're learning, they're innovating, they're wanting us to innovate and us to learn. I think they have like a renewed passion. I think in the last 5 years, seeing a renewed passion in our youth.
Yeah, that's a good thing to note, and that's a good word. And maybe back to what you said earlier, we're starting to see a change in the culturals, even Christian cultures' conviction about Christian ed, because the culture is taking people so far away from anything that's normal. Forget far right. I'm just saying good, normal Christian behavior.
Yeah.
That even the regular crowd and Christian crowd certainly is recognizing this and going, man, I think we may need to give Christian schools a look here. And churches are starting to swing the other direction and being outspoken proponents of Christian ed, which we've never seen
swinging
before.
Back.
Right. And now, of course, we've got school choice legislation, in state after state after state. We're getting there. I know you're still fighting like crazy in Illinois, but, we're, I don't talk to you about Ohio since we're
I know
pretty far down the road
we're
there.
A little jealous over here in Chicago.
Yeah, we're still the envy of the other 49 in that sense. But we're starting to see more and more, say that, okay, there may be something to it. So hopefully where I was going with that is hopefully then next gen leaders are saying that same thing, that I may want to stay in this field because there's real promise here.
Right. If you read stuff on Gen Z, we've all said Gen X and the millennials and gotten such a bad rap. And then Gen Z is saying they're not afraid of dying young. They're afraid of dying old and having not done anything with their lives. They have a mission and they want to matter. They've seen people, I think they've seen the generation ahead of them being mocked and throwing their lives away, and they don't want that for themselves. So I'm kind of excited that we might be turning a little bit of a corner.
That's a great word. And I think that they need to hear that over and over, especially as we continue to speak to them at retreats and chapels and things like that. And it's good to hear that if they want their life to matter and they want meaning and they want purpose, which we know deep down is every human desires that. But if they're saying that now, even more so than their millennials before them, that's a good thing, because this is what will satisfy that heart. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, good. Well, thanks. It's been a great discussion on character and credibility. And I think that, I think our audience can certainly relate to those things, especially now. And this was, an interesting topic in light of the fact that, election's a month away. And whenever people are hearing this, it'll still be election season. It'll either be just before or just after. And this is certainly a hot topic to talk about now. So if they want to know more about you and your ministry or Aurora Christian, what should they do?
It's easy. www.aurorachristian.org. That's our website. And my email's on there. We're all like Collette.house@aurorachristian.org. So we're in the trenches like you are there in Mansfield, and just trying to impact the next generation for Christ.
Yeah, and you've got your hands full, like I said, there in Illinois, and you're fighting a culture that's a little bit different there. But Lord bless you, and keep up the good work. And obviously, we need strong Aurora Christian schools, and we need strong those other Christian schools in Illinois, because at some point, it might break. Yeah, where even in a far left culture like you see there all around you, they say, "Wow, we're just falling apart here."
Right.
And like I said, no one is following the leader.
Right.
And like I said, we're not quite sure how we're going to get there. Maybe they're not all faith-based, but they know that, yes, this matters. And if faith gets us there because it's the thing that we can hold on to, then that's a good thing. Maybe we should explore faith a little bit more. Where can I get faith? Oh, I can get that at the Christian school down the street.
And that's our goal, right?
Yeah.
Get people to Christ.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you again. It's been a good show. Well, thank you also for joining me today on Clearly Christian Podcast. And I trust that now you know more about the importance of credibility for the leader and how that can be driven by your character and grounded in those convictions, of course. Again, if you like the show, you've been listening, help us spread the word, hit the like button, leave a review, and again, let others know that the show is worth listening to. And remember, as I say every episode, the only way we're going to turn things around in this country, as Dr. House and I have been talking about, is to increase the number of people who live and operate every day with a biblical worldview. And we both know the best chance we have to get there is Christian education. So again, this is Dr. Cy Smith with Clearly Christian Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.